Ever feel like you're doing this teaching thing alone? You don't have to be. Shared teaching is all about sharing the workload through the power of collaboration and teamwork. Together, we'll walk through all the difficult parts of teaching and learn how to streamline our processes, fine-tune our time management, and develop a more manageable workload. If that sounds like a dream come true to you, then welcome to the Shared Teaching Podcast. Let's share in the teaching to make those dreams a reality. Now here's today's Shared Teaching. Hello and welcome back to the Shared Teaching Podcast. I'm your host, Susan, and you are listening to episode 159, the second in my new writing process mini-series, which is all about the writing step. So we're going to talk today about getting students to write. So many young students, as you might know, have trouble putting their words onto paper. They might feel overwhelmed or they're just lacking confidence in their abilities to write. Sometimes I had a student that it was the worry, I guess, about being perfect. She didn't want to make any mistakes. If she didn't know how to spell a word, she just kind of sat there. And so by the end of writing time, she usually just didn't have anything on her paper. And I had another student once that would just erase and rewrite and erase and rewrite and erase and rewrite. And eventually I was like, you know what? We're just going to write with pens. And that took away the ability of the constant erasing and writing. So that is a good tip too right there. But with other strategies, we can really create a safe and encouraging environment that makes writing fun and feels doable for our students. So a few other reasons why students might struggle to write is that maybe they have lack of ideas. They're really struggling to come up with topics to write about. Now, hopefully this isn't the case. If you are following me for any length of time, you know that I like to plan out my writing mini units. And at the end of the writing mini units, I'm giving them a call to action. I'm giving them something that they're going to do when they go off to write. So it shouldn't be that paralyzing for them because I'm telling them what they're going to be doing. There's also fear of making mistakes, like the two children I just told you about. A lot of kids can worry about spelling or grammar errors, and we want to take away that fear because we really want them to focus on just getting the words on the paper and know that when it comes to the publishing process, that's when we're fixing those things. So just getting the ideas down, but not worrying about making any of those spelling or grammar errors and having to have everything just so, right? Another reason is maybe difficulty with organization. Maybe they have trouble structuring sentences and ideas can feel just overwhelming. And then low writing confidence. So if writing already feels like a difficult task, students may resist starting. So ways we can get them to want to write. First is using picture prompts. Now this is really good in the younger grades or maybe with ELL students. It's showing them a visual prompt and that can spark creativity and make it easier for students to begin writing. You might ask them things like, what is happening in this picture? What do you think will happen next? How do you think the people in the picture feel? And this is going to help students build a story from an image and make their writing feel more natural. Building a routine in your classroom of having students being observant and finding the details in a picture can also help students expand on their ideas during writing time. So when you say, give me more details, they know it's really about asking those questions to pull out more information about their story. Another strategy is to provide sentence starters. Now, I'm not a huge advocate on using sentence starters, so use this one a little sparingly. And it's going to be things like maybe you give them an example like, one day I found a mysterious box. Or if I could fly, I would go to. Or my favorite thing to do is. So sentence starters are going to help remove the intimidation of just staring at a blank page. Now, like I said, I'm not a big fan of constant sentence starters. So don't feel like you have to use it for a whole class, especially if students are going to work and they're getting right to putting their words on paper. So you're going to use the sentence starters for students that are really struggling to get started. And they're just like, I just don't know. What do I even say? Or how do I get started? Or they're just staring, right? So giving them something to start with. And then eventually you kind of want to like wean them off of that so they're not always needing a sentence starter to get started. Okay, another strategy is to encourage drawing before writing. So students that have difficulty putting words on paper, the drawing can really serve as a pre-writing activity. Now, I will caution you, some students, if you let them just draw to get started, they are going to draw forever, which is why I have mini lessons on doing a quick sketch and moving on, because we want just the basic ideas in our picture, but we really want our words to tell the story, especially if we're in second grade and older. So we're going to ask them to draw their story first and then describe their picture in writing. And I use this method all the time during our narrative writing unit. And drawing is really helping to bridge the gap between their thinking and their writing. Talking about what's in the picture really helps them form those sentences, and then they just write about it. Another strategy to help students overcome this kind of hump of getting writing started is to make writing a group activity. Young students especially really love working with friends. So collaborative writing exercises can really take the pressure off an individual student. So you want to try things like writing a group story where each student adds a sentence, partner writing activities where students take turns writing, whole class brainstorming sessions before turning them over to independent writing. And I use this last strategy a lot because my whole class is helping me to model what we're doing during our independent writing. These group activities are creating a supportive environment that's going to make writing more engaging. And again, younger students love working with friends, and it gives them just the perfect opportunity to do so. Okay, next is focusing on ideas first, mechanics later. Like I talked about at the beginning of this episode, some students really struggle with putting their thoughts on paper and they're worried so much about the spelling and the punctuation because they just want to get it right. Well, how do you spell this and how do you spell that? So you want to make sure that you are teaching them to enjoy the process of writing and not stress over the perfection of getting the words correct. You can teach them things like using the word wall, how to use a sound wall. Maybe they have some kind of phonics chart in their writing folders that are going to help them out. But teaching them how to use these tools during writing time is, especially in the beginning of the school year, is really going to set you up for success during independent writing, because now they can independently use these writing tools to figure out spelling, even if it's phonetic. I always stress phonetic spelling is A-okay. It does not have to be perfect as long as the reader understands what you're trying to write. So we just want them to enjoy the process, and we want to emphasize that editing and polishing comes later. Or my last strategy is to use mentor texts as example models. Now, you know I love using mentor texts during my writing lessons. Favorite mentor text or even a favorite page can be a great way to model for students how to write like that author. By breaking down the technique the author uses in kid-friendly language, students can be encouraged to adapt the same pattern in their own writing. For example, Robert Munsch comes to mind. In one of his books, he's explaining this huge car crash that happens in the middle of this town square. And so he tells about the car crash in details by number. So it goes, I can't even remember, but I'll just spitball here because I don't have the book handy. But he talks about like maybe there was 10 ambulances and 9 police cars and 8 people walking or something like that, right? So you get the idea that as he's telling about this like huge car crash, he's detailing it using numbers. So it's really easy to teach our students, well, hey, you want to tell something, you want to describe something, why don't you use numbers? There were 3 of this or 5 of this, right? And so that would be an example of using the mentor text that's showcasing the numbers, and we're using that same pattern of numbers in our own writing. Very easy to do and very kid-friendly, because what kid can't pick a number to describe something in their story, right? Okay, so last but not least, we want our students to be better writers, and we want them to sit down and get started with writing during writing time. So we need to create a positive writing culture. We want to help them develop their confidence in writing. So we're going to celebrate their efforts with positive feedback. We're going to provide a variety of fun writing opportunities, and we're going to allow for creativity and personal expression. We really don't want everybody doing the exact same prompt during writing time all the time, because then they don't have the freedom to write what they want to write, and then writing time feels like a chore. Okay, last but not least, I thought we'd talk about what the writing step looks like in action. So, as you may know, I no longer teach second grade. I teach GATE, Gifted and Talented Education. But when I was teaching second grade, I expected my students to be writing every day. So during my first few years of teaching, I was actually in first grade. I had an amazing big chunk of writing time in my classroom. And of course, over the years I've been teaching, I've seen it diminish to smaller and smaller chunks. So the last few years I was teaching second grade, I was lucky if it was 15 to 20 minutes of writing time. So independent writing time doesn't always look like them writing a story. I know, a little bit shocking, maybe a little bit controversy here, but hear me out. Some days our writing time, it was used to plan out what we would be writing the following day. So maybe writing time that day was pre-writing or planning, like I talked about last week. And then the following day, the writing time would be actually writing, using our plan from the day before, okay? And if they didn't need all the time for planning, then they would move on and they were free to work on another writing project. So this is where the creativity, the personal expression, the choice comes in. If they finish that day's assignment, they're free to work on whatever they wanted. So often students chose like a fiction or a narrative story to write. They really loved the narrative writing, so writing a story about them and what happened in their lives, very easy to do for them. So they would often pick that, and sometimes they pick to write a letter to a friend using our class letter and card writing center. So that's just very easy ways for them to add more writing in a way that they wanted to. While students were writing independently, I would be checking in on students. So in my class, I had the students choose a writing goal they were working towards at the beginning of the year. So I have these in my TPT store, and what I would do is I would kind of look at a student's writing, and I would think to myself, okay, they're a beginning writer, so maybe these are the goals that they should write on or work on, and I would put those goals in front of them on a table. So we would sit together side by side at my horseshoe table, and I would have maybe like 4 or 5 goals spread out around me on the table, and I would say, these are some things I noticed that maybe we want to work towards in our writing. Which one do you think you want to work on? And so they still had a choice in it, but I was guiding them towards what they really needed to work on, right? Because we don't want to jump into their writing more details in their sentences if they're having trouble even sounding out words. So maybe their focus is sounding out words or writing with a capital appropriately, right, at the beginning of a sentence for people's names. So goals like that is what I would put out for them at the beginning of the year. And I know this is going to be very shocking, but most of the class had the same goals, especially in the beginning of the school year. Right now you have a couple high flyers that are working on other things like the details, but the majority of the class was working on sounding it out, adding spaces between words, capital letters, things like that. And then at least once a week while they're writing, I tried to check in with every student for progress on their goals. Now, I don't mean every student every single day, but by the end of the week, my goal was to have hit the whole class. Very easy to do when I'm only spending like 2 or 3 minutes per student with looking over their writing and talking about their goal. So I'm looking at their writing, we're pulling up their part in their notebook where they have their goal pasted, and I'm saying, okay, your goal was to put spaces between your words. How are you doing that with that? And we would look at their writing, And if they were doing really well and they had spaces or the spaces were too wide, we would kind of talk about that too. And I'd say, these are looking great, except maybe we want to bring our words a little closer together because we don't need like 3 finger spaces between every word. We need a little bit smaller gaps between our words, but still big enough that people know that each space is a word. Let's look at maybe some mentor texts and see how the writing looks like in those stories versus what we have on our paper. Okay, so that's very short, quick, to the point. And then I would kind of quietly mark on my own checklist if I saw them meeting their goal or if they still wanted to work on that. And once they mastered the goal, they would pick the next goal. Now, my goal is to make sure the students are showing me in their work at least 3 times that they're mastering this goal before they would pick a new goal. Now, these writing conferences, of course, only lasted a few minutes for each student, and it gave me the opportunity to also choose a student that I could then showcase at the end of writing time. So the last few minutes of our writing block was used for share time, and some days that meant students kind of buddied up with their writing partners if I was really short on time, and only one partner would share that day. And then the next day, the other partner would share. So really you only have one kid sharing their story, and then the other students just listening and maybe offering one positive, not necessarily feedback, but something about like, wow, I really liked how you started that story. Okay, so other days I might have a student come to the class and they would read a certain sentence or two that I found went really well with that day's lesson. So I hope you enjoyed today's podcast episode and got some stuff out of it. And I really want to know, do you have your students write every day? I hope you do. So until next time, have a great week, and I will be there next week on the Shared Teaching Podcast. Bye for now. If you've loved this show, then join me in sharing the teaching,
hitting that subscribe button,
and leaving us a review on
iTunes,
so we can be found by more teachers like you who are ready to start sharing the workload. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Find new episodes each week on sharedteaching.com. Thanks for listening to the Shared Teaching Podcast.